The desert was quiet in the way that only danger makes it. A dry wind brushed across the wadi, dragging fine sand over metal and stone. Ethan Cole knelt in his heavy bomb suit, visor reflecting a rusted jerrycan with wires spilling like veins from beneath. His breathing filled the helmet, slow and measured, but every sound seemed louder out here, as though the world itself was holding its breath. 50 yards back, Major Harlan Pike crouched behind a Humvee door, binoculars fixed on Ethan's silhouette. Pike was a man who had led enough missions to know when silence meant safety and when it meant death waiting. His knuckles tightened on the radio handset, ready to call instructions, though he trusted Ethan's steady hands more than anyone's. Ethan's gloved fingers hovered over a small circuit. One wrong movement, and the desert could erupt. He focused, narrowing his world to wire colors and the faint tremor of the device. The sweat inside his suit rolled down his spine, trapped heat pounding against patience. Then it happened, the vibration against his chest. His phone. At first, he ignored it. No one called during an op. But it buzzed again, sharp, insistent, cutting through his concentration. His heart stuttered. He risked a glance, pulling the phone slightly forward inside his armor. Unknown number. His wife never used unknown lines. His daughter didn't even own a phone. Something clawed at him. He thumbed the speaker. "Mr. Cole? This is Crestview Prep," a thin voice said, polite but trembling. We need to inform you there was an incident. Your daughter, she's been locked in a storage room." Ethan froze. His entire body went rigid, hands still poised over a live bomb. Locked in a storage room? He blinked hard inside his visor. His mouth moved before his brain caught up. "What did you just say?" The voice hesitated, then sharpened as if reciting a rehearsed line. "Your daughter was placed there by her teacher. It was necessary for discipline." The desert heat suddenly felt cold against his neck. Then, faintly through the line, came another voice. Small, fragile. It split his chest in two. "Daddy," he said, "kids without money need to learn their place." "Maya." Her voice cracked into sobs. The words echoed inside his helmet louder than any explosion. Ethan's eyes blurred, his breathing ragged. His daughter wasn't just locked up, she was humiliated. Someone wanted her broken. Pike caught Ethan's stiff posture, the way his shoulders trembled even under armor. "What is it?" Pike barked into the comms. Ethan's jaw clenched, but before he could answer, Pike stepped closer, reading the terror in his friend's eyes. Ethan held out the phone on speaker, and Maya's muffled crying spilled into the desert air. For a moment, even Pike forgot about the device. Then the commander's voice cut like a blade. Pike grabbed his radio and shouted, "Cerberus, pull Cole out. The bomb can wait. Get him out now." The order ricocheted through the team net. Soldiers scrambled, securing perimeter lines. The sound of rotor blades began to build in the distance, thumping louder, closer, until sand whipped in violent circles around Ethan's crouched figure. He should have been relieved, but all Ethan felt was fury boiling under his skin. The device in front of him no longer mattered. His daughter was trapped, crying in the dark, mocked for being the child of a man who had nothing but his hands and his honor. He stepped back carefully, retreating from the wires, each movement heavier than the last. When he cleared the danger zone, Pike grabbed his arm, steady but urgent. "What's going on?" Pike demanded. Ethan's voice cracked, but his words were steel. They locked Maya in a storage room, and the man who did it told her she had to learn her place. Pike's eyes narrowed. He didn't need more details. The mission had already changed. The helicopter roared overhead, sweeping them away from the desert and towards something darker, something more personal. Ethan looked back once at the bomb, the silent desert, and realized the truth. The real explosive wasn't buried under sand. It was waiting for him at Crestview Prep. And this time, the wires were around his daughter's life. The helicopter's roar still rang in Ethan's ears when his boots hit the pavement outside Crestview Prep. The school didn't look like a battlefield, but felt like one. Polished brick walls, trimmed hedges, banners with smiling faces. Everything neat, rehearsed, perfect. Too perfect. Ethan strode toward the front office with Maya's cries still clawing at him. each step heavier than his bomb suit had ever been. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and lemon polish. A receptionist with a fixed smile looked up, her eyes flicking nervously from Ethan's uniform to the sweat-dried salt on his skin. She straightened papers she didn't need to touch. "Mr. Cole," she said quickly, "Principal Kerr will explain everything." "Where's my daughter?" Ethan cut in, his voice low, dangerous. Before she could answer, the office door opened. Principal Daniel Kerr emerged, slim and polished in a gray suit. He wore the expression of a man who had practiced it in a mirror, sympathetic but not too much. "Mr. Cole," he said smoothly, "please, let's not alarm anyone. This was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." Ethan's fist curled. "You locked my 11-year-old in a storage closet." Kerr raised his hand slightly, palms out, his smile stiff. "Not me, personally. A teacher. There was disruption at lunch. We have procedures for these things. Safety measures." "Safety?" Ethan's voice cracked with disbelief. "You call locking a child in a dark room safety?" From the hallway, a small figure darted forward. "Daddy!" Maya's voice cut through everything. She launched herself into his arms, her small body shaking. Ethan crouched, wrapping her tight against his chest, pressing his cheek to her hair. He whispered, "It's okay. I've got you." But her sobs didn't stop. Kerr shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the raw emotions spilling across his neat office. "She's unharmed," he said firmly, as though repeating it might make it true. No permanent damage was done. Ethan's eyes snapped up. "She's crying like this because of damage." Movement at the edge of his vision drew his attention. A tall man in a dark security uniform leaned against the hallway wall, broad shoulders, shaved head, eyes sharp and cold. Weaver, the school guard. He didn't look guilty. He looked amused. His radio crackled softly at his belt. "Is that him?" Ethan asked, voice like gravel. Maya's head buried into his chest, but she nodded. "He grabbed my arm," she whispered. "He said kids like me need to learn their place." Weaver smirked, not even denying it. Something inside Ethan nearly snapped. Pike's words in the desert echoed in his head. "The bomb can wait." He realized this was the bomb. Not wires and circuits. This man, this system, this smirk. Before Ethan could move, another voice came from the hallway. A woman in her early 30s, dark hair pulled into a bun, eyes red from crying. Ms. Elena Alvarez, Maya's homeroom teacher. She hesitated, then stepped closer, her voice shaking. "Mr. Cole, I'm the one who locked her in." Ethan spun, disbelief burning in his chest. "You?" Her hands trembled as she held them up. "Please listen." Weaver grabbed her. He said those words to her. "I knew if I argued, it would get worse." That storage room, her voice cracked. It was the only place with a deadbolt. "I locked her in to keep her safe. I stood outside the door the whole time." Her eyes searched Ethan's face, pleading. "I told her to call you. I told her not to move until I opened it. It was the only way I could buy time." Ethan's chest tightened. His anger didn't fade, it just shifted. Weaver's smirk grew thinner, but stayed. Principal Kerr cleared his throat sharply, eyes darting to the receptionist, then to Weaver. "That's enough. We will handle this internally." Internally. That word tasted like poison. Ethan looked around, the donor plaques on the wall, the way everyone avoided eye contact, the heavy silence pressing down. Something bigger was at work here. Maya's small hand gripped his sleeve. Her whisper trembled. "Daddy, don't let them put me there again." Ethan rose, holding her close. His voice was steel. "No one will ever lock you in the dark again." As he turned to leave, his eyes met Weaver's. For a split second, Ethan saw it, the arrogance of a man protected by someone richer, someone pulling strings. The desert bomb hadn't gone off, but this one had just started ticking. Ethan carried Maya down the polished hallway, her small frame clinging tightly to his chest. The other children peeked from classroom doorways, whispers trailing behind them, but the teachers pulled them back quickly. It wasn't just curiosity in their eyes. It was fear. Fear of seeing too much. Fear of being next. When he pushed open the glass doors, sunlight hit hard, sharp against his eyes. The parking lot gleamed with neatly lined cars, but one vehicle stood out. A gray SUV idled near the curb, engine running, windows tinted. A man in a blazer leaned against it, phone pressed to his ear. He wasn't a parent waiting for a child. His stance was too deliberate, too watchful. His gaze flicked once toward Ethan, then away, as if cataloging him rather than confronting him. Ethan's instincts prickled. The way the man shifted his weight, the way Weaver had smirked inside. The two weren't disconnected. "Daddy," Maya whispered, burying her face into his shoulder. "That's the car," he talked to the guard. Ethan's jaw clenched. The SUV door opened briefly. Weaver stepped outside, his uniform crisp now, radio silent. His smirk had melted into a professional mask, but his eyes still carried the same glint of superiority. He spoke quietly with the man in the blazer before slipping back inside. The SUV didn't leave. It just waited. Rachel pulled up in their family sedan, brakes squealing slightly. She jumped out, worry etched into every line of her face. "Maya." "Ethan." Her voice cracked as she pulled their daughter into her arms. Maya clung to her mother, sobbing fresh tears into her blouse. Rachel's eyes shot to Ethan, searching his face. What happened? She wouldn't stop crying on the phone. Ethan's hand brushed her back, steadying her. "I'll explain at home." His voice was low, controlled, but beneath it lay a current she recognized. Rage, carefully caged. As Rachel buckled Maya into the back seat, Ethan's phone vibrated again. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Cole," came a smooth, rich voice. "Gregory Price here. I heard about the unfortunate incident with your daughter." The words slid like oil, polished and rehearsed. "Please accept my apologies. That security guard, Weaver, was out of line. I'll make sure he's transferred. Crestview is a place for opportunity. I want her daughter to thrive." Ethan gripped the phone tighter. "How do you know about this already?" Price chuckled softly, like someone humoring a child. "Mr. Cole, I make it my business to know. Please don't let this color your view of the school. Scholarships are rare opportunities. I'd hate for Maya to miss hers." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. Rachel looked at him sharply. "Who was that?" "Gregory Price," Ethan muttered, slipping the phone into his pocket. His eyes flicked back toward the gray SUV. Still idling. Still waiting. Rachel frowned. "The donor? The one with his name on everything here?" Ethan nodded once. "That's the one." He glanced at the school building again. The plaques mounted near the entrance, the polished gold lettering. Price Foundation STEM Lab, Price Foundation Gymnasium. Security system provided by Price Solutions. His stomach turned. When they pulled away, Ethan checked the mirror. The SUV didn't follow. It just sat there like a shadow waiting for the right time. At home, Rachel held Maya while Ethan washed his hands, scrubbing so hard his knuckles reddened. The scent of the desert, the sweat of the bomb suit, the humiliation in Maya's words, it all clung to him. He leaned against the sink, water dripping from his fingers, and saw Maya's tear-stained face in his mind. "Kids like you need to learn your place." That wasn't just a guard's cruelty. It was a message, a warning, and Price's call proved it. Ethan stepped into the living room. Pike was already there, waiting, uniform jacket off, eyes sharp. "I had a feeling you'd need backup," Pike said. He nodded toward Maya asleep on Rachel's lap. "She okay?" "She's scared," Ethan answered. His voice carried no cracks now, only steel. Pike studied him for a moment, then asked the question Ethan had already been circling in his mind. "What if this isn't about discipline at all? What if it's about you?" Ethan's gaze drifted toward the window, toward the horizon where the desert lay quiet but deceptive. He thought of the sloppy bomb, the too-perfect timing, and Price's smooth assurance. For the first time, Ethan admitted it aloud. "Then it means someone wanted me distracted. And if they were willing to use his daughter to do it, the wires in the desert weren't the only ones waiting to explode." Silence settled after Ethan said it out loud. Someone wanted him distracted. Pike didn't argue. He reached into his satchel, set a scuffed thumb drive on the coffee table, and glanced toward the couch where Rachel had finally lulled Maya to sleep. The TV was off. The only sound was the air conditioner's thin breath and the occasional car rolling past the house. Relief team pushed their body cams. Pike said quietly, "Let's look at what you walked away from." They moved to the kitchen table. Ethan opened his laptop. The screen lit, their faces bluish and tired. Pike plugged in the drive. Folder names populated. CERB, 2, Wadi CM, stills. He clicked the first file. Grainy video bloomed. The Wadi, all glare and heat. The relief tech's breathing rasped in stereo as the camera swept the device Ethan had stepped back from. The feed paused on a close-up. The rusted jerrycan, a cheap pressure plate, and a tangle of wires that looked menacing from a distance and wrong up close. Pike tapped the spacebar, frame by frame. "See the plate?" he murmured. "No travel. Those springs are from a door chime. And here, no booster cap seated in the cavity. Whoever built this wanted it to look like a bomb, not act like one." The tech's gloved hand in the footage lifted a flap of electrical tape. Under it, instead of a proper firing circuit, sat a mismatched battery clip dangling into nothing. The camera tilted to bare earth beside the device. Tire tracks arced in, then out, a neat loop that never came within 5 feet of the pressure plate. Someone staged it, took a victory photo in their head, and planned to fetch it later. Pike let that land. He scrubbed forward until the on-screen timestamp filled the corner. "Now your call log." Ethan slid his phone across. Pike lined the timestamps with a finger. The first ring from Crestview. The camera's device found mark. Minute for minute, they matched. Ethan stared hard at the numbers until they stopped being numbers and turned into intent. A buzzing under his sternum started again, like phantom rotor wash. In the living room, Maya shifted and sighed in her sleep. He swallowed. Pike opened another file. A public clip from a procurement demo at Base the week before. Gregory Price in a tailored suit, pacing a stage with a confident smile. His voice, polished and unhurried, came through the laptop speakers. When incidents spike, human techs are distractible. Autonomous package doesn't blink. It never leaves a device for a phone call. The word thudded, distractible, as if Price had selected it by weighting it with Ethan's name. Ethan's jaw tightened. He hadn't left any device for a phone call in his career. Not until today. Pike closed that window and opened a PDF of district invoices he'd pulled from public records. Logos and line items slid past. Price Solutions security upgrade. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2, East Wing, pending. A note in the margin, typed in the bland voice of procurement. Camera offline during maintenance cycle. "The storage room," Ethan said, seeing the dead red light above Maya's door again, the scrape around the latch. He looked at Pike. They knew where the blind spot was. Pike's look said, "We're close, but not done. There's one more thing. Ms. Alvarez texted me while you were washing up." He slid his phone across. On the screen, a shaky waveform and a caption. He set it into his radio. "I caught a bit through the door." Pike tapped play. Weaver's voice bled out tinny and mean. "Price wants the girl quiet." Ethan was suddenly very still. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. The kind of quiet that comes when a wire brushes your glove and you realize you're not dealing with chance. He looked toward his sleeping daughter and then back at the laptop, the loop of tracks in the sand, the invoice, the word distractible. "They used her," he said. It wasn't a question. "They used both of you," Pike answered. Different ends of the same lever. Ethan closed the laptop gently, as if shutting a lid on a live fuse. "How do we pull it without blowing our own hands off?" "We don't yank," Pike said. "We stage the truth and let it tighten around the right necks." He tapped the thumb drive. "We'll need the school to say yes to a safety partnership dog and pony. Donors love their faces on banners." A thin, humorless smile tugged at his mouth. "Invite them to the room they think they already own." Ethan nodded once. The fury that had wanted to smash something found a cleaner edge. He brushed Maya's hair from her forehead as she slept, then looked at Pike with eyes that had set charges in worse places. "Set the room," he said. "I'll be there." Pike didn't waste a breath after set the room. He pulled his phone, thumbs already moving. "Kerr first," he said, voice low. "Offer him a chance to be photographed doing the right thing." He typed while Ethan watched Maya sleep, her cheek mashed into Rachel's shoulder, a small fist still clenched as if the dark might return. The call connected on speaker. Kerr's voice came pre-smoothed. Pike pitched it clean, a community safety partnership briefing, faculty, a few parents, maybe a donor or two, so the school could reset trust. He sprinkled words that made principals feel taller. Transparency, collaboration, optics. Kerr exhaled in relief at a solution he could put on a flyer. Yes, tonight's too soon, but tomorrow after last bell, 5 o'clock in the library. I'll invite Mr. Price to share remarks. Pike ended the call and dialed another number. District Council, he mouthed. When the attorney picked up, Pike's tone shifted, plain procedural. He asked to log an audio, video, pilot documentation for the safety session, citing training value and open records compliance. The council emailed a 2-page form before they hung up. Pike printed it, slid it across Ethan's table, and flipped to page 2. This line authorizes audio for training. Kerr's signature covers the room. He tapped a box already ticked from council's side. Participants notified at entry. We'll bring a small sign. Ethan read the form twice, then nodded. No traps. No edits. Let the room record itself. His phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Alvarez. Can we meet? Not at school. 10 minutes later, she was in their driveway in a faded cardigan. Fingers knotted in the hem. Rachel took Maya to the bedroom. Ethan and Pike met Ms. Alvarez by the hood of her car. Porch light pooled around them. I need to show you something, she said, unlocking her phone. An email from the school office sat open. Reminder, East Wing camera maintenance window, 1100 to 1500. Do not rely on live monitoring. The timestamp matched the hour Maya had been locked away. Ms. Alvarez's voice shook. We were told to keep students out of that corridor for noise. Weaver told me, don't worry, Price Solutions will sort it. She swallowed, then pulled up her audio. You heard this part. Weaver's voice bled again. Price wants the girl quiet. She tucked hair behind her ear. There's more. When I opened the door, Weaver was on his phone. He said, we're good. Dad's busy. He didn't say a name, but he looked down the hall toward the donor wall like it would answer. Ethan felt that colder quiet return. Will you be in the room tomorrow? Ms. Alvarez hesitated. If I stand up, they'll come for my job. Stand next to us, Rachel said from the doorway, soft but firm. And we'll stand next to you. Ms. Alvarez nodded once, small and brave. I'll be there. Morning arrived, because it had to. Pike and Ethan were at Crestview by 8 with a printed form and a polite sign. This session may be recorded for training and safety documentation. Kerr signed with practiced flourish, not reading page 2. Excellent initiative, Major, he said, already imagining the newsletter. He CC'd Price's assistant on the invitation. A reply landed minutes later. Mr. Price will attend. Brief remarks prepared. Weaver drifted through the office like nothing in the world could touch him. He read the sign, smirked, and kept walking. Out the window, the gray SUV idled again, as patient as yesterday. Ethan clocked it, then turned to logistics. They set the library in concentric half-moons. Parents' chairs close, faculty behind. Pike tested the projector. A bland slide deck glowed. Community Safety Partnership. No ambush title, no gotchas. He positioned a slim recorder near the lectern, a second one on the reference shelf, nothing hidden beyond what the sign already announced. If it's lawful and boring, he murmured, they won't see the edges. Between tasks, Ethan walked the East Wing corridor. The red light over the storage room camera blinked dead. A laminated work order hung crooked on the wall. Phase 2. Pending. He ran a finger over the fresh scrape near the latch, a mark left by panic at the speed of help. He pictured Maya's small hands in the dark, phone lit to her face. His stomach hardened. By noon, word had leaked enough to draw a parent cluster. The whispers had shifted timbre. Less fear, more curiosity with a grit of anger. Someone asked Ethan if this was going to get messy. He answered carefully, it's going to get clear. Kerr floated in and out, checking angles, reminding staff to smile. He thanked Pike 3 different ways, always with the word partnership threaded through. In a corner, Weaver checked his phone, jaw flexing at a text flashing and disappearing before Ethan could read it. At 4:50, the room settled into the quiet that comes before a curtain lifts. Rachel slipped in along the back row. Ms. Alvarez took a seat 2 chairs away, hands folded tight in her lap, eyes forward. The district attorney arrived without a badge on display, just a canvas tote and a school board lanyard Pike had left at reception. She nodded once to him, then found a chair near an exit, anonymous as a winter coat. At exactly 5, the library door swung open. Gregory Price entered like someone used to rooms rising, navy suit, white pocket square, cufflinks that winked. He shook Kerr's hand, clapped Weaver on the shoulder in passing without looking at his eyes, and lifted a palm to the parents with a benevolent smile. When he reached the lectern, he patted the recorder as if it were a pet he owned. Pike stepped up first, the perfect host. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice even. He pointed to the sign about recording. No one objected. He advanced the first slide, bullet points about safety drills, visitor protocols, camera upgrades. He thanked Mr. Price for his ongoing commitment to student safety. Price smiled wider. Kerr beamed. Weaver relaxed a fraction. Ethan sat 3 rows back, hands on his knees, pulse steady like he was waiting on a timer only he could hear. He looked at Ms. Alvarez, who stared straight ahead, jaw set. He looked at Rachel, who looked at him and didn't speak. He looked at Pike, whose face gave away nothing. The room was set. The wire was live. And for once, the people who had always owned the script didn't realize they were standing inside it. The library lights hummed faintly overhead, reflecting off the polished tables arranged into neat half-moons. Parents shuffled into their seats, the smell of paper and floor polish mixing with the faint scent of coffee from the teacher's lounge down the hall. Ethan sat with his back straight, his hands resting firmly on his knees. He was a soldier used to waiting on detonators, but tonight the tension was personal. It buzzed beneath his skin like a live current. At the front of the room, Major Pike controlled the projector remote with casual authority. He looked less like a military officer and more like a careful community consultant, calm and approachable. Yet Ethan knew Pike well enough to recognize the precision in his every move. Each pause, each glance at the audience was calculated. Pike wasn't presenting. He was staging. Principal Kerr drifted across the carpet like a man proud of his stage. He clasped hands with parents, introducing Gregory Price with rehearsed warmth. Our most generous benefactor, a true friend of Crestview. Price accepted the attention as if it were his birthright. His smile gleamed, his navy suit pressed without a wrinkle, cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. He gave Weaver, standing at the back wall, a slight nod that looked more like ownership than acknowledgement. Rachel slipped into a chair in the last row. Ethan caught her eye just briefly. She gave the smallest nod, her hands folded tightly in her lap. 2 chairs down, Ms. Alvarez sat stiffly, her back too straight, her lips pressed together so firmly they seemed pale. Ethan saw her glance toward Weaver once, and then fix her eyes firmly on the projector. The first slides clicked forward, community safety partnership, bullet points about visitor protocols after school drills, and maintaining a safe, inclusive environment. Parents murmured politely. Kerr leaned forward, eager to emphasize phrases like renewed trust and moving forward. Price sat with one leg crossed, smiling at each line as if he'd authored them. Then Pike spoke. "This is about transparency," he said smoothly. He gestured toward the small sign at the entrance. "This session may be recorded for training and safety purposes." Nobody objected. The recorders glowed quietly where he'd placed them, unseen except by those who knew to look. Ethan felt the room breathing as one. Parents leaning slightly forward, curious but unaware. Weaver shifted against the wall, arms folded, eyes occasionally flicking toward Ethan with a grin that never quite formed but sat in his face like a shadow. Pike continued with small details, fire exits, updated camera placements, staff protocols. Then, with a slow press of the remote, the bland slide dissolved into black. For a heartbeat, the room was silent, only the hum of the projector filling the space. Then a sound spilled from the speakers, grainy, rough, caught through a phone pressed against a wooden door. Weaver's voice, clear enough to cut through every layer of polite air. "Price wants the girl quiet." The library seemed to freeze. Parents looked around, expressions confused at first, then sharp. Kerr blinked rapidly, adjusting his tie, his face paling beneath the lights. Weaver straightened, his arms no longer folded but braced against the wall as if the floor had tilted beneath him. Price leaned forward in his seat, smiling still, though tighter now, his hand brushing the cuff of his sleeve. Context matters, he said calmly, as though coaxing a restless crowd. That sounds like a phrase pulled apart. Misunderstandings happen, rumors. Pike didn't interrupt. He let the silence chew at the edges of Price's words. Then, evenly, he clicked the remote again. The projector lit up with a grainy body cam still, a desert device under the blazing sun. The jerrycan, the sloppy wires, the obvious decoy. The timestamp shown at the corner. Minute by minute, Pike said, his tone steady. He slid Ethan's phone log onto the screen beside it, side by side with the device timestamp. The moment Mr. Cole received a call from Crestview, a stage device was found. Harmless, but dramatic. Convenient timing. The murmurs grew louder now, parents shifting uncomfortably, some whispering to one another. Ms. Alvarez's hands twisted in her lap. Rachel leaned forward, her jaw tight. Ethan didn't move. He watched Price instead. The man still smiled, but his jaw flexed just slightly, like a crack in polished marble. Human techs are distractible, Pike said then, pressing another button. The projector filled with footage of Price himself at a procurement demo, pacing a stage in front of military brass. His voice carried into the library. When incidents spike, human techs are distractible. Our drones don't blink. They never leave a device for a phone call. The words landed like shrapnel. Every parent in the room turned almost instinctively toward Ethan, who sat stone still, his eyes fixed on Price. He felt the anger coil in him, but he kept his breathing slow, even. Price finally spoke, voice rich and smooth again, though a touch sharper this time. I donate to this school to create opportunity, to keep it safe. What we're doing here is slander dressed as theater. He spread his hands in mock humility. Do you want Crestview to lose its future because of conspiracy theories? Pike didn't reply. He clicked the remote once more, the black screen returning. Silence hung in the library, thick and heavy. The trap was tightening, and Ethan knew it. The fuse was nearly lit. And Price, still smiling, still calm, didn't yet realize how close the fire was to his polished shoes. The library air grew heavy after Pike let the screen fall to black. Parents shifted uneasily, their murmurs swelling, spilling into the silence like a rising tide. For the first time, Gregory Price's smile wavered. He crossed his legs the other way, leaned back in his chair, and tapped a finger against his cufflink. It was a small movement, but Ethan caught it. It wasn't calm. It was calculation. From the back wall, Weaver uncrossed his arms. He scanned the room, lips pressed tight, jaw grinding. The bravado in his posture had slipped into something tauter, like a spring wound too far. Ethan's eyes locked on him briefly, steady, unflinching. Weaver looked away first. Price cleared his throat, his voice slipping into a rhythm that had smoothed over boardrooms and politicians alike. Let's remember, he said evenly, the nature of recordings. A clip here, a clip there. Strung together, they could be made to suggest almost anything. I've spent my life funding institutions like Crestview. If we lose sight of that, he raised his voice slightly, casting it toward the parents. If we tear down our supporters over fragments, who truly loses? Our children. Some parents nodded automatically, the way people do when authority tells them something comforting. But others leaned forward, suspicion dawning. Ms. Alvarez's face was pale, her knuckles white against her notebook. She looked like someone balancing on the edge of a cliff. Pike let the silence stretch a beat too long. Then he spoke, measured and deliberate. Fragments can mislead, yes. But fragments connected to timestamps, procurement contracts, and testimony begin to form a picture. A clear one. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The authority in his calmness was louder than Price's showmanship. Price's smile thinned. Major Pike, you serve your country well. But you're a soldier, not an auditor. Let's not confuse field stress with facts. He turned toward Ethan, then, the first time his gaze met his directly. His tone softened into something almost paternal. Mr. Cole, I can only imagine the strain of your work. You hear your child crying, you walk away from a device. Of course you feel manipulated. But be careful. Don't let grief create ghosts. Ethan's fists tightened against his thighs. He wanted to stand, to shout, to tear the mask off the man in front of him. But Pike's quiet presence at the lectern held him still. He drew one long breath, steady as when a circuit lies beneath your gloves, waiting. At the back, Weaver shifted again. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He checked it quickly, then slipped it away. Ethan saw the motion, sharp and furtive. The SUV outside flashed in his mind. The same idling presence, always waiting. Rachel's voice broke the silence from the back row, soft but firm. My daughter came home shaking so hard she couldn't eat. She told us what was said. That's not a fragment. That's a scar. Her eyes glistened, but her tone didn't waver. The parents turned toward her, and for the first time, the murmurs favored truth over reassurance. Ms. Alvarez lifted her chin, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry. I locked Maya in that room, not to punish her, to protect her. Weaver was coming toward us. He'd already grabbed her arm. He told her she had to learn her place. I heard him say it, and I heard him on the radio say Price's name. Gasps rippled across the room. Weaver's face darkened, the controlled mask fracturing. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Price exhaled through his nose, slow and careful, then stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate poise. Enough, he said, his voice booming now, no longer honeyed. This isn't justice. It's theater. Do you really believe a man like me would endanger a child? Look around this school. My name is on its walls. My money built its classrooms. And you think I'd burn it all down over what? A contract. The veneer cracked, just for a second. The question rang not as outrage, but as defense, as if the idea wasn't unthinkable, just inconvenient to admit. Pike's hand hovered over the projector remote, his expression unreadable. Ethan sat frozen, every muscle ready, but waiting, sensing the crescendo building. He glanced at Rachel, who never looked away from Price. He glanced at Ms. Alvarez, who was shaking but refused to sit down. He glanced at Weaver, whose posture had become a coiled thread, eyes darting toward the exit as if calculating. The library had shifted. The power no longer belonged to the man in the navy suit or the guard against the wall. It belonged to the room itself, to the parents, to the truth beginning to stitch together. And Ethan knew the next move, whatever it was, would set everything off. The silence after Price's outburst weighed heavy, like the seconds before detonation. Parents exchanged glances, their whispers sharper now, less forgiving. Kerr fumbled with his tie, clearing his throat as though he might still wrestle back control of the room. But no one looked at him anymore. All eyes were locked on Price. Price steadied himself, drawing in a breath, regaining his polished smile. This school thrives because of partnership, he said, his tone returning to that smooth, boardroom cadence. Yes, mistakes were made. A guard acted rashly, a teacher overreacted. But let's not confuse unfortunate choices with conspiracies. Do not let a soldier's paranoia tear apart what we've built. Weaver nodded from the back, as if confirming his benefactor's words. His arms folded again, but the motion was too rigid, too defensive. Ethan didn't miss the way Weaver's jaw worked, grinding tight enough to whiten the skin around it. Pike let Price's words hang in the air just long enough. Then, without changing his tone or expression, he clicked the remote. The projector's hum deepened, and the black screen flickered alive again. This time it wasn't Weaver's voice or a desert still. It was a recording, audio only. A man's voice, Price's unmistakable cadence, though sharper, stripped of polish. Time our pressure event with the East Wing maintenance. The father will stand down. He always will for his kid. Distractible. The words rang across the library like a slap. Parents gasped. Some recoiled, eyes wide, hands covering mouths. Rachel's breath caught, her hand clenching the edge of her chair. Ms. Alvarez pressed a trembling fist to her lips, tears springing to her eyes. Ethan didn't move. He sat absolutely still, but inside, every nerve fired like a live wire. He'd suspected, pieced together hints, but hearing Price's voice saying it aloud, the confirmation, it cracked something deep inside him. Price rose slowly, his smile finally gone. That recording, he began, voice tight, is fabricated, edited. Splice to frame me. Do you truly think I would? Your words, Pike interrupted, calm as ever, taken from a call subpoenaed this morning. He turned to the parents, his voice level, not theatrical. The district attorney has reviewed it. She's in this room right now. Every head turned, scanning. From near the exit, a woman in a simple blazer rose, a school board lanyard around her neck. She set her tote bag on the table and withdrew a small leather case. The badge glinted under the fluorescent lights. Gasps spread again, louder this time. Price's face blanched. This is outrageous, he snapped, the controlled cadence fraying into raw anger. Do you realize who I am? The DA's voice was calm, professional, but cold enough to chill the room. Yes, Mr. Price. A man who believed his name could shield him while he endangered a child and attempted to manipulate military procurement. You orchestrated a staged device and exploited your influence here to prove a point. And now you're caught. Weaver moved suddenly, pushing off the wall as though ready to bolt. Two officers in plain clothes, who had slipped in quietly moments earlier, stepped forward. Don't, one warned. Weaver froze, his bravado collapsing. Parents' murmurs turned into quiet outrage. Some stood, others shook their heads. Kerr's face went paper white. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Ethan finally stood, his chair scraping against the floor. He didn't speak, didn't raise his fists, didn't move toward Price. He just stood tall, steady, every inch the soldier he was. His silence was louder than anything Price could say. Price's composure cracked entirely now. He jabbed a finger toward Ethan. This man, this soldier, you let him twist you into believing lies. He's unstable. He left a bomb in the desert. No, Pike said firmly, cutting through Price's shrillness. He left a decoy, because his commander ordered him to protect what mattered most. That's not weakness. That's strength. The DA nodded to the officers. They stepped forward, taking Price gently but firmly by the arms. His protests filled the air, shrill and frantic, a far cry from the smooth benefactor he'd been minutes earlier. You'll regret this. I built this place. I own this place. But the room had shifted. Parents who once nodded politely at his speeches now glared. Ms. Alvarez lifted her chin, tears drying into resolve. Rachel's shoulders eased, her eyes finding Ethan's, steady at last. And Maya, safe at home, would never know the exact moment it happened. But tonight, her father's world had stopped bending to men like Gregory Price. The library was no longer Price's stage. It was the place his mask had finally shattered. The room did not exhale. It braced. Price's protests ricocheted against spines and bookshelves as the officers guided him a step from the lectern. One of them, careful and calm, read him his rights. The words sounded small against the size of what had just broken. Weaver tried to slide along the back wall, toward the side door. An officer in plain clothes, glasses, teacher silent, stepped into his path. Hands where I can see them. Weaver's fists lifted reluctantly. A second officer relieved him of his radio. A third collected his phone in a clear evidence pouch. For a moment, Weaver looked like he might test the space between bodies and door. Then he saw Ethan watching him, still unblinking, and he stopped. Principal Kerr surfaced, as if from a depth he had not planned to swim. There must be a mistake, he said, voice paper thin. This is a school function. We cannot. The district attorney turned to him, not unkind, but unblinking. You signed a recording authorization, Mr. Kerr. You've helped more than you realize. Please remain available for questions. Kerr's mouth closed with a soft click. Pike stepped off the dais and moved like a man practicing good habits. He unplugged the recorder from the lectern, ejected the card, and slid it into a labeled envelope he'd brought for exactly that action. He did the same with the second unit on the reference shelf. Chain of custody in ink. He showed each seal to the DA before he signed his name along the flap. The mundane ritual cut through panic like the feel of tools in the hand. Parents began to stand, not rushing the front, not shouting, just standing with a quiet that carried weight. One woman near the end of the row spoke first. My son told me a guard threatened to take his lunch privileges last month if he didn't stop sitting with a scholarship kid. She found Ms. Alvarez with her eyes. I didn't know who to tell. Another parent lifted a printed email on her phone. We were told East Wing cameras were down. We asked why a month-long maintenance never ended. No one answered. All the while, Price kept talking, the tone slipping from magnanimous to manufactured outrage to something raw. You can't do this in front of them, he hissed to the DA. This is theater. He stabbed a finger toward Pike. He staged it. He hates my company. No, Pike said even. You staged it. We recorded it. Weaver finally spoke, voice hoarse. You don't know what you're doing. He glared at Ms. Alvarez. You think they'll keep you? You're the one who locked the kid. Ms. Alvarez flinched, then straightened. I locked the door, she said, loud enough to reach the far row, because you were coming. Her voice steadied on the last word. I stood outside until her father arrived. Kerr's receptionist, who had been a quiet shape behind the counter earlier, stood as if yanked by a string. Her face was blotched with the panic of someone tired of holding a secret. Mr. Kerr told me to stall calling Mr. Cole, she blurted. He said, "Lure me in first. Mr. Price is on his way." She choked on the last words, shame and relief colliding. I'm sorry. Kerr turned to her, color draining. Angela, the DA's pen paused over her notebook. Thank you, she said to the receptionist, not looking at Kerr. We'll need your statement. She glanced toward the door and, as if conjured by the shift in air, 2 uniformed officers entered with a campus security supervisor. We'll also need to secure the server closet. Now, Ethan said almost nothing. He stood where he was, palms flat against his thighs, and let his breathing keep time with the projector's faint fan. The urge to cross the distance to Price had burned out, leaving something cleaner, the knowledge of who had done what, and the feel of a crowd finally looking in the right direction. Rachel touched his shoulder. When he turned, she wasn't crying anymore. She's with my sister, she whispered. She's asleep. She asked if you were mad at her. I told her you were mad for her. The corner of Ethan's mouth moved, almost a smile but not for joy, for recognition. Mr. Cole, the DA said, approaching, her voice drop-forged. We'll want your formal statement tonight while details are present. You're under no obligation to speak here in front of the group. We can step into the conference room. Her glance flicked to Pike, then back. And we'll be coordinating with your command regarding the device footage. Of course, Ethan said. His first words since standing felt like sand rinsed clean. Behind them, the gray SUV man, blazer phone, appeared at the library threshold, as if he had emerged from the wall. He didn't enter. He watched, then slipped a step back. An officer caught the motion and followed, quiet as a shadow. Price tried one last time to make the room smaller, to fold it into the pocket he knew. If any of you speak out of turn, he warned the parents, you'll see what litigation feels like. The threat did not land the way it used to. It arced and fell, a thrown thing with no weight. A father from the second row, sleeves rolled to scars on his forearms, answered for the room. We've seen what silence feels like, he said. It's worse. The DA nodded to the officers. Mr. Price, Mr. Weaver, she said, professional and precise, you'll come with us. Weaver went first, shoulders caved in. Price lifted his chin, arranging dignity on himself like a garment. It didn't fit. As they passed Ethan, Price paused, searching his face for something. Anger he could exploit, pity he could purchase. He found neither. Ethan did not look away. The absence was its own sentence. When the doors closed behind the officers, sound rushed back into the space. The scrape of chairs, the hush of clothing, the stutter of someone remembering how to breathe. Kerr sagged into a seat, then jerked up again as if the cushion were hot. He looked to Pike, then to the DA, as though a script might still be handed to him. None arrived. Pike stepped to the front once more, not to lecture, but to anchor. You'll receive instructions from the DA's office about how to submit statements, videos, emails. If you're told not to speak, speak anyway. If you were made to feel small, you won't be tonight. He let his eyes find Ms. Alvarez. Faculty who intervened to protect students did the right thing, he said, and the sentence landed like a hand on a shoulder. The parents didn't cheer. This wasn't that kind of movie. They gathered themselves. They took photos of the notice sign at the door. They exchanged numbers. They spoke to Ms. Alvarez in low, sincere voices, the kind that makes staying possible. Ethan followed the DA to the conference room. No time jump, just a turn of the handle and a different kind of quiet. Fluorescent hum, a water cooler with an off-kilter label, a table that had hosted bake sale plans now holding a recorder and 2 legal pads. The DA pressed the red button. "Whenever you're ready," she said. He told it as it happened. The wadi heat, the wires like veins, the call that made the desert colder than snow. His daughter's voice, the dead camera light, the scrape by the latch, the gray SUV, the smooth call from a man who had already decided what the day would mean. He did not add adjectives he hadn't felt. He did not reach for heroics. He kept to the angles of truth. When he finished, the DA capped her pen. "Thank you," she said. "We'll be in touch tonight. We may execute warrants before morning." He nodded. At the door, he paused. "There's something I need to do first." Back in the library, the last clusters of parents were drifting into the hall. Ms. Alvarez stood alone by a cart of encyclopedias, the edges of her cardigan pulled through her fingers as if the knit could keep her upright. Ethan crossed to her. "You stood outside the door," he said. "Thank you." Her eyes glossed with sudden water she'd held back through everything else. "I was afraid," she said. "I did anyway." "Me too," he answered. And for the first time all night, the corners of both their mouths lifted, the smallest, truest acknowledgement of courage. Not the absence of fear, but movement through it. Pike appeared beside them, a quiet gravity. "We're not done," he said. Not ominous, just factual. But the room turned. Ethan looked at the empty lectern, at the space where a man had thought he owned air. "Good," he said. "Let's stay turned." Outside, night pressed against the library windows. Somewhere across town, a child slept. In the school that had tried to teach her place, a different lesson had begun. The library emptied slowly, as though parents were afraid to be the first to step into the hallway. Their voices floated down the corridor in low, urgent tones, like currents converging into a stronger tide. Ethan lingered, standing near the lectern, his hands braced on the edge of the table where Pike's slides had flashed only an hour before. The hum of the projector had stopped, but its fan ticked as it cooled, filling the silence with a faint pulse. Pike packed the last recorder into an evidence pouch, double-checked the seal, and handed it to the district attorney. She nodded once, efficient, her mind already miles ahead, drafting warrants, mapping interviews. Weaver and Price were gone, swallowed by the process, but the shadow of their presence still clung to the air. Kerr hovered near the door, pale and wrinkled like paper left in the sun. He tried once more, voice faltering. I only did what I thought protected the school." The DA didn't look up. "You protected donors, Mr. Kerr, not children." He deflated against the jamb, as though waiting for someone to speak up for him. No one did. Parents walked past without acknowledgement, their eyes on Ms. Alvarez, on Ethan, on each other, but not on him. Ethan followed Rachel out into the hallway. Maya wasn't there. She was safe with Rachel's sister, but her absence sharpened the edges of everything. Rachel slipped her hand into his. "She'll ask tomorrow," she whispered. "She'll want to know if the man who hurt her is gone." He squeezed her hand gently. "We'll be able to say yes." Behind them, Ms. Alvarez gathered her bag. A few parents surrounded her, thanking her quietly, some with tears. She looked surprised, as though she had expected blame instead of gratitude. When their eyes met, Ethan gave her the same nod he had in the library. Respect, plain and solid. They stepped into the night air. The lot was nearly empty now, but the gray SUV still sat near the curb, headlights off. This time, 2 uniformed officers stood beside it, flashlights cutting through tinted glass. The driver, the man in the blazer, leaned against the hood with arms raised, expression flat. He wasn't Price. He was muscle, anonymous, replaceable. The officer spoke quietly into radios. Ethan's chest tightened. It wasn't fear. It was the reminder that for every Weaver, for every Price, there was always another waiting in the shadows. He turned to Pike. "This doesn't end with them." Pike's jaw worked once. "No, but the chain gets weaker when you start snapping links." The DA joined them, tucking her notes into her tote. "Weaver isn't holding. Price is being processed. We'll hit his company's servers tonight. If there are contracts tied to this stunt, we'll find them. She paused, looking directly at Ethan. We'll also need you on record with procurement. They'll ask what you saw in the wadi. Ethan nodded. I'll tell exactly. Sloppy wiring, decoy circuits, staged for effect. They weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to sell something. Rachel's grip on his hand tightened at that. Her eyes shone with both anger and relief. They put Maya in that room for a sales pitch, she whispered, like she was part of the test. The fury in her voice was sharp, raw, unfiltered. Ethan pulled her closer, his own throat heavy. Never again, he promised. A cluster of parents approached then, hesitantly. One father, tall with rough hands, spoke for them. Mr. Cole, Major Pike, we didn't know how deep this ran. We kept quiet because we thought it was just discipline. But tonight his voice caught. Tonight we saw it. We'll stand with you. Pike gave a short nod. Then don't let this fade tomorrow. Write statements. Show up. Tell the truth when they come asking. That's how we turn one night into change. The parents nodded, their faces set, their fear traded for something harder, resolve. As the group dispersed, Ethan leaned against the car, exhaling for what felt like the first time in hours. Pike looked at him, eyes tired but steady. You did what mattered most. You walked away from that device because your daughter's voice mattered more. Ethan met his gaze. Price thought that was weakness. Pike shook his head. No, that's power he'll never understand. Above them, the street lamps hummed, casting long shadows across the asphalt. The night was still, the air sharp, the school quiet. For the first time since the desert, Ethan felt like he could breathe without sand in his lungs. But deep inside, he knew the real explosion wasn't the decoy he'd left behind in the wadi. It was the ripple that had just begun, truth tearing through the careful walls men like Price had built. And those walls, once cracked, wouldn't stand much longer. Morning crept into the Cole household slower than usual. Sunlight touched the blinds, striping the living room in gold and shadow. Ethan sat at the kitchen table in his plain t-shirt, elbows on the wood, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't sipped from. Rachel moved quietly, not wanting to wake Maya yet. The house felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. The phone rang at 7:12. Ethan answered, his voice steady though his stomach tightened. On the other end, Major Pike. The DA executed warrants overnight. They pulled half of Price Solutions servers, and a school board met in emergency session. Weaver's already flipped. Flipped? Ethan asked, staring at the countertop. He's talking, Pike confirmed. Admitted the SUV guy was on Price's payroll. Admitted the decoy device was staged to make your walk-off look like proof of human failure. He gave up call logs, too. Price directed every move. Ethan's jaw worked as he absorbed it. He'd known the truth, but hearing it spelled out was like touching the live wire anyway. And the school. Pike's sigh came through the line. Kerr resigned at dawn. The board accepted it in 2 minutes flat. Cameras are being replaced by a neutral contractor. But Ethan, Price still has allies. Donors, lobbyists. This isn't over. Ethan glanced toward the hallway, where Maya's bedroom door was cracked open. He lowered his voice. I don't care about Price's allies. I care about my daughter never being put in that position again. After breakfast, Maya patted out, hair tangled, her voice small. Daddy. She crawled onto his lap, eyes wide. Is the man still at school? Ethan pulled her close, heart catching. No, sweetheart. He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. Promise? She whispered, her eyes searching his face. I promise. He meant it like a vow. Rachel brushed Maya's hair back and added gently, You don't have to be afraid of going back. Ms. Alvarez and your friends will be there. And we will be too. Later that morning, Ethan sat across from the district attorney in her office downtown. Files stacked in neat towers, blinds half closed to block the harsh sun. She slid him a transcript of his own words from the night before. We'll need you to testify in the procurement hearings, she said. Price leveraged a federal contract with this stunt. The jury will need to hear exactly what you saw in the desert. Ethan scanned the transcript, his signature waiting at the bottom. He signed without hesitation. I'll tell them everything. She studied him for a moment. Most men would have stayed on the device. They'd have frozen when the call came through. You chose your child. Ethan met her eyes. There was no choice. Not for me. That afternoon, back at the house, Pike dropped by. He stood in the doorway with his usual calm weight. Parents are forming a committee. They're done letting donors run the place. His gaze softened as he looked at Ethan. You realize you started that by walking away. You gave them permission. Ethan shook his head. I didn't start anything. They did. I just stopped ignoring it. Maya peeked around the corner then, clutching a crayon drawing. She shuffled up shyly and handed it to Pike. The stick figure man in green, standing beside another taller figure with a helmet, wires drawn as squiggles beneath. A smaller girl stood between them, smiling. That's you and Daddy, she explained, her voice brighter now. Pike crouched, studying the page. You drew us brave, he said. Maya tilted her head. No, I drew you true. Ethan felt the words lodge deep. Not brave. True. That night, after Maya had fallen asleep again, Ethan and Rachel sat outside on the porch. The air was cool, the street quiet. Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you think it's really over? She asked softly. Ethan stared at the empty street, thinking of Price's threats, of the SUV man, of the polished plaque ripped from the school wall. It's not over, he admitted, but it's ending, piece by piece. Rachel squeezed his hand. Then we'll finish it together. The stars stretched across the night, steady and indifferent. For the first time since the desert, Ethan believed they might sleep without dreaming of wires. The courtroom was colder than the desert had ever been. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere, controlled, clinical, every sound echoing too sharply. Ethan sat at the witness table, uniform pressed, hands clasped, eyes steady on the prosecutor. Behind him, the gallery was filled. Reporters, parents from Crestview, Ms. Alvarez with her cardigan sleeves pulled tight, Rachel sitting close to Maya, who had insisted on being there to see it end. Gregory Price sat at the defense table, suit immaculate, hair combed perfectly into place. But the sheen was gone. His smile was tight, brittle. The man who once strolled into rooms like he owned them now sat shackled by silence. Every whisper in the gallery about him. Not for him. The prosecutor asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Mr. Cole, on the day in question, what happened in the Wadi? Ethan inhaled slowly. He spoke as he had the night of the library session. Calm, precise, stripped of embellishment. The device was staged. Sloppy wiring, no booster, no detonation path. It was built to look dangerous, not to be dangerous. At the same moment I was working the device, I received a call that my daughter had been locked in a storage closet. That call was meant to pull me off the device, to prove a point about human fallibility. And whose point was that? The prosecutor pressed. Ethan didn't flinch. He looked straight at Price. Gregory Price's. The room murmured. Maya squeezed Rachel's hand tighter, eyes never leaving her father's face. The defense attorney tried to cut in, objecting, spinning words like fabrication and conspiracy. But then came the recordings. Weaver's voice, Price's voice, the body cam footage, the invoices. Each played in sequence. Each piece fitting together until the defense's words rang hollow. The DA, sitting 2 rows back, didn't move, her expression carved from stone. When it was over, Ethan stepped down. As he passed the gallery, Rachel touched his arm, her eyes wet but proud. Maya whispered, "You sounded stronger than him." 2 days later, the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, fraud, conspiracy, child endangerment. Weaver's cooperation had stripped away every excuse. Price's empire, once untouchable, cracked open like glass underfoot. Contracts dissolved. Plaques removed. The man who believed he owned the school's walls would leave with nothing but the echo of his downfall. Crestview prep changed quickly after. Cameras replaced, policies rewritten, donors reined in by new oversight. Ms. Alvarez returned to her classroom with quiet dignity, parents thanking her openly now. The receptionist, Angela, testified too, her relief visible in the way she finally smiled without flinching. On a late afternoon, Ethan and Maya walked the corridor together. The East Wing camera light blinked green again above the storage room door. Maya stopped, staring at it. For a moment, Her shoulders tensed, but then she exhaled, reaching for her father's hand. "It's not dark anymore," she said. "No," Ethan agreed softly. "It's not." They continued down the hall, past the donor wall where plaques had been stripped clean. The rectangle where Price Foundation once gleamed was bare plaster now, a scar across the bricks. Ethan slowed, running a finger along the clean paint. It looked like something pulled out, like a tooth extracted from a rotten jaw. Maya studied it, brow furrowed. "It looks empty," she said. Ethan shook his head. "It looks honest." That night, back at home, they sat on the porch as the cicadas sang in the distance. Rachel leaned against him. Maya curled up between them with her sketchbook, drawing galaxies in colored chalk on the steps. Pike stopped by, setting 2 beers on the railing. He didn't stay long, just enough to sit, to share silence, to nod at the stars. As the sky deepened, Ethan breathed easier. The desert's wires, the storage room's darkness, Price's polished mask, they were all behind them now. The cost had been high, but the lesson carved into stone. Power wasn't the name on a plaque or the smirk of a man with influence. Power was a father walking away from a bomb because his child needed him more. Power was a teacher locking a door not to punish, but to protect. Power was truth, steady and relentless, finally breaking through. Ethan looked at Maya's drawings, spirals of light against the wood, and smiled, not out of victory, but out of something deeper: survival, strength, renewal. The last wires had been cut. The bomb had been defused, and the lesson about power had been taught.